This episode is brought to you by the Regional Air Quality Council. This summer, go wild for Front Range air quality. Turn off your car instead of idling the engine in parking lots and pickup lines to help reduce ground level ozone. Did you know that idling your car for just 1 minute creates about 150 balloons worth of air pollution? Learn more ways to help improve air quality in the Colorado Front Range at simplestepsbetterair.org. And you can sign up for summer ozone text alerts to know when it matters most by sending Better Air CO to 21000. Today on CityCast Denver, City Council debated it for weeks and on Monday evening finally approved a big bond for voters to decide on in November. So we're talking about all the last-minute negotiations and sharing voicemails and texts from you, our listeners, about some of those bond projects, plus other hot-button issues we've been talking about recently. Today is Thursday, August 7th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Producer Paul Caroli, hello.
Hey, good morning, Bree.
Good morning. And producer Olivia Jewel Love, hi.
Hello, everybody.
We're doing a mailbag. We're digging into our emails, voicemails, text messages, looking back at what you all are sharing with us. Comments, thoughts, questions about previous episodes. We're going to start with talking about stuff related to the Vibrant Denver Bond, which we know moved through City Council this week. And will be headed to the ballot in November. Paul, was there I guess what was the final? There was a change. Should we talk about that change?
Well, yeah, I think there's a few changes. They were negotiating for several weeks, and there was lots of last minute lobbying. Over the weekend before the vote on Monday evening, I was getting texts, I was getting emails from various organizations like, "Oh, we're still pushing for this, we're still pushing for that." And then, as it happened, Monday evening, there was a little bit of a horse trade going on at City Council. It was just one piece of a very big bond. I mean, we've been talking about this. It's a $950 million package. Voters are going to be deciding in November. But the piece that changed, this is according to Denverite, is They reduced some funding for improvements at Red Rocks, for street paving, and for the electrification of city facilities. And that money is instead going to be going to affordable housing, despite Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer, who represents a little bit of the southeast side, saying that the language on that item, and this was a consistent theme from her on the affordable housing item, was, quote, extremely nebulous and ill-defined, which could be a sign of the battle to come over this bond.
Yeah, I found that comment interesting, too, related to the fact that this shift was putting money back into the affordable housing, the piece that she voted against, after money had been taken out of the affordable housing to fund two projects she was pushing for, which was the 13th and 14th Avenue improvements.
Yeah, I think it's, that issue is definitely one to watch because the whole city, I think, would agree that housing is a huge priority. Given the cost of rent, although that's been going down a little bit, and the cost of housing in general, relative to like 10, 15 years ago. But last year, the mayor's previous big ask of voters was the sales tax increase to fund affordable housing. And a lot of people found that ballot had similar criticism to Sawyer, that it was too vague, that they weren't sure what it was going to do. And the city said no. So will the bond meet that same fate over these same criticisms? I don't know. We'll be watching.
Yeah, we'll be watching that for sure. So we have some comments from listeners about our last conversation about the bond, which was about money for transit projects. Olivia, do you want to read some of what we've got?
Yeah. We've got this one from Jill Locantore.
Denver Streets Partnership.
Yeah, the Denver Streets Partnership.
Been on the show many times, yeah.
And she's responding to our Friday show with Deep Singh Badesha, where one of our topics, we talked about Bike Power Rising. So here's a little bit of what she had to say. I was somewhat disappointed in today's episode about Bike Power Rising for two reasons. I think people tend to forget that the name bike lobby is tongue-in-cheek, something advocates have embraced in response to critics who talk about bike advocates as if they are on par with, e.g., the oil and gas lobby. The reality is that the Denver Bike Lobby has zero funding and minimal formal organizational structure. It is simply a substantial and growing group of Denver residents who just want the option to bike safely in their community. I felt like today's show made it sound like the Denver Bike Lobby is in fact run by paid lobbyists.
That's a good point. That's a great point. Paul, what do you think about that as a cyclist?
Oh, no, I agree. I mean, we had that exact conversation comparing these group of unpaid activists to big high-paid lobbying firms. So yeah, I appreciate the clarification from Jill.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I mean, although different constituencies have different kinds of representation, anything that's not like one person, one vote, and you're doing organizing, you're doing advocacy. The thing about the bike people, I mean, we'll talk about the rest of Jill's comment, but the thing about the bike people is the people who can bike happen to also be people who skew a little bit more affluent, a little bit more white, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more time to contribute to certain issues. And I think that's maybe what we were discussing a little bit more on Friday is the disproportionate representation that these interests have in local government. But I do appreciate Jill's point that, regardless of all that, those socioeconomic factors, these people are not well-funded corporate shills.
Totally.
They're just citizens.
Yeah, they're just passionate people that care about bicycling in the city and infrastructure and how that interacts with the built environment we already have. Okay, well, Olivia, do you want to read maybe the first line of Jill's next comment and we can talk about it?
Yeah, I'll read a little bit more. Jill continues and said, I was also disheartened to hear the complaint that the movement for safer streets needs to be more inclusive and talk about pedestrians and people with disabilities in addition to bikes. The Denver Streets Partnership formed nearly a decade ago as an informal coalition of bike, pedestrian, transit, and safe streets advocates who came together explicitly to move beyond transportation identity politics. She says in parentheses, I'm a bicyclist, you're a driver, she's a pedestrian. To advocate collectively for a better transportation system that provides real mobility options for everyone and doesn't require people to risk their lives just trying to get from one part of town to another.
That's a great point. And I agree. I mean, I don't think I was very clear there, but I appreciate Jill pointing it out. My criticism was in doing work with the disability community, it often feels like the bike conversation was happening separately. And I think back to when my friend Kaylin, who's been on the show, was running for mayor, there was this great transit race that I think that Denver Streets Partnership put on. And the whole idea was to get candidates running for different offices during that time to get from point A to point B using public transit, walking, biking, not driving. And so Kaylin and I did this project. And when we got to the end of the great transit race at the big party at the end, there were no tables that she could reach. It was all high top tables at this big celebration. And we kind of had to sit at the back by the table full of granola bars. And it was just sort of like a moment where it did feel like, is this just separate? Is this just in addition to, or are we just kind of here? And that was just a moment for me where I was like, this feels like a little bit disjointed. That was also a couple of years ago. And I think that Jill makes a great point. There has been so much coalescing around better transit options and safer pedestrian mobility with all of these groups. I think she mentioned pedestrian dignity, Jonathan Stalls. He's who I think of immediately when I think of folks that are truly advocating for people with disabilities when it comes to transit. But totally fair point, Jill, and I agree with you. And I think the work that Denver Streets Partnership has done has been amazing. I think I've just found sometimes the bicycle conversation is very separate from the accessibility conversation. So,
well, yeah. And speaking to that point, there was a debate. I mean, what we were talking about last Friday was this other change in the bond package around 13th and 14th Avenue. You mentioned this earlier, Bree, but there was a couple of rival amendments. There was one from Councilman Sawyer and one from Councilman Parody. Parody's amendment would have included funding for a bike lane from Broadway to Colorado. And what council ended up choosing was Sawyer's amendment, which included no bike lane. And so I think, however much these bike people, the advocates specifically for bike infrastructure might be, rising and growing, this is not a win for them. There is no dedicated bike lane in the bond. I heard from one of these activists after our discussion that, we may have framed them as having rising, growing in power, but they don't feel like they had a win here at all. They feel like they're on their back feet. And this person that I talked to specifically, she was like, I don't know if I'm going to vote for this bond. There's no new bike lane. That was our one ask of this whole bond was we want at least one protected bike lane. That's what the mayor, that's what they understood the mayor was promising when he was running as a candidate, and they're not seeing it in this bond. So she's undecided.
I will push back just a little bit and say, though, I think the improvements to the 6th, or at least to 8th Avenue Bridge, will be a win for bikes and pedestrians, because they're talking about bringing that to grade. And anytime they're changing something as massive as taking a bridge down, I know that they're going to make the sidewalks wider, that space bigger. They've already done it actually at 8th Avenue right before you get onto the bridge. So I have a little bit of hope that at least that's something that might be seen as a win for cyclists, but I totally hear them. There is nothing about bike infrastructure specifically.
I hope so too. And I think the same thing about the 13th and 14th Avenue street calming infrastructure that's in there. Like, that's going to benefit them too, but it gets at this issue of like, not every project is for every type of mobility that might be in this diverse coalition. And so, as much as they're advocating together and they're helping each other out, and as people, they might feel like all of the things are good for all of them. There are some things that are really only for some people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, accessibility upgrades tend to benefit everyone, but I also just want to point out that Jill's work includes the sidewalk initiative that we passed that was going to do wonders for accessibility in general. So I don't want to undermine the work that Denver Streets Partnership has done by not highlighting the fact that they do work on accessibility issues that do impact everybody. But yeah, I mean, it's a big bond. I agree. 13th and 14th are crazy to be on as a pedestrian. So hopefully that will help everyone. We'll see. This episode is brought to you by Multipass. Founded by event hosts for event hosts. Sell tickets and memberships, plus find local events with Multipass. Proudly based in Denver and deeply rooted in the local event and creative scene, Multipass isn't your run-of-the-mill ticketing platform. It actually provides space to build community around cool events happening in the city. When you buy tickets through Multipass, it unlocks a chat feature that allows folks to connect directly with other people going to that event. Friendships could be made through Multipass. I mean, how many other ticketing platforms could say that? Plus, it gives event producers the ability to build loyalty with their audience through membership management tools built right into the platform. I'm volunteering at a music festival coming up soon, and I'm going to talk to them and see if they're using Multipass or not, because it's like the perfect DIY level thing that I, again, as a former events producer, would love to have had access to. So, see if I can introduce this. Multipass is designed to help everyone in the event ecosystem win, not just the platform. Learn more at multipass.com. That's multipass.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
All right, so next topic. Oh, should we talk about work from home? Back to office mandates. This whole conversation, we actually asked our Instagram followers about today how they felt about it, because the city has been talking about currently, I think city employees work 3 days a week in the office, and they've been talking about mandating 5 days a week. And this has just been a big conversation. Olivia, do you want to share a comment we got from someone about this?
Yeah. This is from Kyle R. He said, not a city worker, but have several friends/connections with people who work for the city of Philadelphia. Their return to work mandate was a disaster. See the article below. We'll link it in the show notes. Several talented employees were poached and other frustrated ones quit. Forcing people back into the office full-time seems to be repeating mistakes of the past. Office worker reliance is what got downtown into this mess in the first place. We can't force people to like downtown and bring its vibrancy back via office mandates. What we can do is make it an appealing place to work and live. Make downtown, or at least parts of it, a place that actually feels like a neighborhood.
I love this comment. And all we will. This article is really interesting about there was kind of a mess that happened in Philadelphia when they brought folks back, and there wasn't enough office space, and people were basically like working in hallways, sharing outlets. Like it sounded like pretty messy. I don't know, Paul. What did you think?
Oh, no, I agree. It was a very funny article. People should check it out. But the image of like all these city workers sharing outlets and like, if you were lucky, if you were a high ranking worker, you maybe got to have a converted storage closet as a private office. And isn't that a nice treat for you? What I liked here was this detail about, now I'll quote from the article, the work environment changes have altered the dynamic on his team too. They're talking about one of these people who's, anyway, it wasn't unusual with remote work for salaried employees on his team to hop on after traditional work hours to handle anything the department needed to function. But now there's zero interest in working a second longer than required. But now when you're working in the office, quote, now because of the mandate, it doesn't feel like anybody wants to do anything unless they're in the office, which has been a little weird to adjust to, this one worker said, which was like, oh yeah, I do kind of remember that culture changed when work went remote during the pandemic. There started to be this expectation of like always on and like the physical presence in the office. Maybe that's what that was connected to more than the other changes that we all experienced. I don't know. There's a lot to think about with this issue.
I think it's time trade-offs to me is how I read this is, when we're remote, we get that time back from commuting and getting ready and doing all these other things. And so at least this was the mindset that I had was once I was working at home, I didn't mind doing those kinds of things like logging on a little bit late. I mean, we do that. We actually do this all the time. Logging on, updating something, whatever. And to me, mentally, it's just a trade-off for the flexibility that we have as a hybrid. We're a hybrid workplace. I mean, full disclosure, people need to know. But my thought about work from home in general, and I think a lot of folks made this point on our Instagram, was accessibility. This is something that folks with disabilities had been asking for decades, was the ability to work remotely. And I'll just say, as a person that had a child during this whole thing, this hybrid work schedule was invaluable to me as someone that was balancing a lot of different things in my life. And that, children or not, people are balancing all sorts of things in their lives. And so I do find the push to get people back to the office interesting because underlying it often just feels like we need bodies downtown to make downtown vibrant. And I agree with Kyle, who writes, that's not going to make downtown happen. Downtown has to be desirable or cool or offer something other than just get your body down here and things will happen.
I think that always on conversation is interesting. I come from a completely different perspective. COVID started when I was in college. So this is like the only kind of work environment I've really known. But, I think that like, you've got to remember that, when you're working completely in person, people still aren't, productive 8 hours a day.
Sure.
Like people still aren't doing that. So like, I don't know, the expectation that like you're getting time back and you should be able to like log on whenever and, do stuff after hours. It's just like, I don't know, a conversation of boundaries that I've like found myself thinking about a lot and like, discussing and like pondering for my mental health of like, what are the boundaries I need to set? It's like, because work is in my living room and it's like, how do I make work not be my living room?
Yeah.
And so just kind of, thinking about like, because the cubicle was like the compartmentalization of your work. It was like 9 to 5
from it.
You leave it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, if your desk is in your bedroom, it's kind of hard to, keep it out of your head. So I think it's like a new set of challenges that like, it's kind of weird that it's like, oh, like you're so lucky you get to work remote. And it's like, it's still work, I don't know.
Totally. I think the boundaries thing is so related to your workplace, how your workplace handles boundaries, how the conversation goes. I was in a hybrid workplace pre-COVID. That was just already the office culture. But I know from talking to a lot of folks, that was not the case, that COVID really introduced something new. Mm-hmm. But I'm with you. Boundaries are, and who gets those boundaries? I think that's another big part of it is hierarchically in your job, who gets to have boundaries and who doesn't. We got another, did we get a voicemail related to this conversation?
Yeah, we got one from Kara.
Yeah, let's listen to a voicemail.
Hi, my name's Kiara Chavez. I grew up in Valverde neighborhood. I work for the city of Denver for the best department, Denver Parks and Recreation. I heard your episode from Monday, and I'm just calling to say that if the city went back to working 5 days a week in the office, I would definitely not quit. I love working for the city of Denver. It's where I grew up, and it was one of the perks for me to have an office downtown. We're located near Civic Center Park, so I love it. I think it's a great view of the city and a great way to engage with it. From the time that I was hired in 2021, we've been adhering to Mayor Hancock's decision to have workers be there for 3 days a week. I think that's the requirement for now with most of the teams in the city, and then it just kind of depends on your role if you go in more times or if you're able to have more remote work or be on the field if that's necessary. So it's all variable, but I believe we're operating under a 3-day into the office week for now, which if it's enforced, that's another question, But yeah, love Denver, love CityCast Denver, and thank you all. Bye.
I love that we heard from an actual city worker. That's pretty cool.
Did Mike Johnston make you record this voicemail?
Yeah, I was going to say the same.
Was he breathing down your neck while you were recording this?
The person who gives us her whole name, her department, is the person who says they love the.
He was watching you do this.
I guess me not being cynical here is like, this is the kind of employees sometimes I've encountered in living here my whole life, are like people that I have friends that are lifelong workers at the city and they really love it. So that's, of course, one person's perspective, but I like that. We've got a voicemail that's in response to Mayor Johnston and our ongoing conversation, which is related to this, to the revitalization of downtown. So let's hear that voicemail.
Hi there, CityCast. I have a little bit of a spiel just after listening to the Mike Johnson episode, but my name is George Bangs. I'm an artist living downtown. And I actually put up a mural with the Downtown Denver Partnership in Ryder Square. So I was listening to the most recent episode of CityCast with Mayor Mike Johnson talking about the $400 million figure that he mentioned for refitting downtown for more residential space and making it more enticing for businesses. And specifically what came to mind was the idea of some kind of vacancy tax. I don't think it's part of his policy platform, but it could really go a long way to help shift the total burden of revitalizing downtown from prospective shoppers more onto property owners. And it would help to pay for the residential developments that he's talking about as well. Just like a simple 1% to 3% tax on a vacant property's assessed market value for vacancies over 180 days a year helps to incentivize a more competitive market for business owners looking downtown for their leases by putting a cost against leaving these spaces empty while landlords are there waiting for higher bidders. And the revenue from taxes like this significantly help to cover the cost of the residential construction while simultaneously making downtown a more appealing place to live. These taxes have been shown to work in increasing the market supply of housing and retail space in New York, Vancouver, Oakland, and Washington, D.C. So it seems like, maybe a potential win for Denver residents and businesses, granted at like a marginal cost to commercial property holders. I feel like that's a trade-off that, it seems like it's worth it for the city to make. Anyways, thanks for sitting through the spiel. Have a great day. Bye.
Paul, I think this was an idea you talked about a long time ago on the show, the vacancy tax. What do you think about George's take?
Well, I love this take. From George. It's a super smart idea. I have to give credit to Chris Nicholson, who is now one of the directors of RTD. He was the person who initially floated this idea where I saw it, at least. It's been around for a while. Other people have done this. But yeah, I think it's interesting. And I actually know, because I've talked to some people in the city in the relevant departments, that this is a proposal that has been discussed. I know that it's been put to the mayor, and so by implication, we know that he's chosen not to do it. But I think it's super provocative because this is definitely one of the big problems. Like these property owners are not lowering their prices to move leases to keep, retailers in there, which is like the end goal of what, people want to bring, some folks back to make it a little bit more appealing. I think the downside is that anytime you tax something like this, it makes it less appealing to do for like one of these big, and I know they're not the most sympathetic people, but the people who own these buildings, the big commercial real estate property owners, they're going to be fewer people who want to do that kind of business in Denver. And we want those kinds of people to do that kind of business in Denver to bring more money to the city instead of going to other markets. So that would be the small downside to consider and worry about. I don't know. I've never talked to one of those people. I would love to hear what they think about it, but that would be the trade-off.
All right, let's move on to something fun. We got a voicemail. We did this great episode a couple of weeks ago with Mario, the Colorado foodie, about Mexican food in Denver, sort of the ever-evolving landscape, what it looks like, what kind, his favorite spots, and we got a nice voicemail from Josh about Mexican food.
Hi, this is Josh from Denver. So earlier in the week, you guys did a show about Mexican restaurants. And you mentioned molcajete. I just had my first molcajete a year ago, and I was mind blown by the flavor. So now I've been trying molcajetes at a few different restaurants. The first molcajete I had was at Taco Jalisco on 38 between Stewart and Tennyson. That's the best one I've had. I've tried it at Guadalajara, 72nd, and it was okay. And then I also tried the one at Los Carboncitos on 38th and Pecos, and that was pretty good too. But my favorite one was at Taco Jalisco. So maybe do a show on who has the best molcajete in Denver. All right. Love your show. Have a great day.
Man,
you just gave it to us, Josh. You gave us the takes.
I know. He gave us such great. I haven't been to Taco Jalisco in so long. That used to be our like hangover brunch spot in the early 2000s, and it is still there. Oh man. So good. I'm glad he reminded us of that. That was great. Delicious. Okay. Well, before we go, we have one more email. This was directed to you, Paul, from Mike and Centennial.
Can we do the subject line? Because I liked the subject line.
Paul wrong about the election. Subject line. Mm-hmm. All right. Here's the email. Paul, you claim the next election would be about basic economics, and I think it's a dire misread. While I agree Gaza may not be the driving force, I think the governor election will be about our governor's response or lack thereof to the creeping fascism of the Trump administration. I think the left will be looking for someone to stand up and fight back. Mike from Centennial. Well, Paul?
I think that's a great take from Mike. And if that's the case, I mean, Bennett is maybe our leading candidate. He's polling the strongest in the governor's race right now. And how is that going to look that he is deciding to leave the Senate to run for governor? Is that him abandoning the fight against fascism, or is that him leading a new fight against fascism?
I feel
how, what people see here.
I feel like that was the initial grumble about him even running, was like, wait, so you couldn't get anything done there? So you're going to come do this? But that's a good question.
We'll see.
It's an interesting race.
I don't know if this is going to be the main thing either. That I think that's an interesting take, but I wonder how. Also, it's in a year, so we'll see. Olivia, where are you at? What do you think is going to be swaying people?
I don't know. I think probably like the average consumer of like how it's going to affect household like prices of. It felt like, it at least in the last presidential election, it was like prices of eggs, prices of groceries, and then everyone was like, well. That didn't happen. So I kind of feel like that's usually what's on the average person's mind.
It just is the thing. Like most people just don't care about that much in the broader world.
That's the biggest thing in most people's lives. How they can afford to live and feed themselves. So, that's like the most important thing to the average person.
Well, and we haven't seen it let up. I don't know if anybody's been grocery shopping lately, but it certainly hasn't gotten any cheaper. Like King Soopers likes to advertise like it has, but I'm like,
you got to buy 14 bottles of condiments
to save $4
to be able to get. Yeah, it's like, Gotta be an extreme couponer.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's that. I think it's, cost of living. And I also think immigration will probably play into this election.
Yeah, probably.
Personally, but we'll see. Well, we're always loving to hear from you, our listeners. Give us a call, 720-500-5418 anytime. Leave us a voicemail, send us a text about any show, anything you want to talk to us about, any questions you might have. Let us know. Paul, Olivia, thanks for joining me for this fun mailbag.
See you next time.
Bye.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell an owner of an empty building downtown about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya.